What's poppin', everybody? Episode 27 of the Slip and Weave podcast. Going to be getting into Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson, Dubois and Joyce, as well as Rosado and Jacobs, and a couple other fights. So let's get right into it. Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson, probably, if you're watching this, there's a good chance that those are two of your favorite fighters of all time. Same way it's two of my favorite fighters of all time. Two guys in their 50s got it on in an exhibition match for charity this weekend on Saturday. But before I get into that, first and foremost, I want to talk about this fight between Daniel Jacobs and Gabriel Rosado. Just right off rip, this is a horrible decision. And I know that on this show, I'm just constantly talking about bad judging and bad scoring. But this fight right here, in a lot of ways, is everything that's wrong with the sport right now. It's everything that's wrong with the sport. You know, first of all, there's a clear A side and a clear B side, which in boxing there always is, unfortunately. You got Jacobs, who's sort of thought of as the very top of the sport in a lot of ways, as far as, you know, his weight neighborhood. Thought of as a top contender, giving Canelo and Triple G all they can handle. And Rosado is kind of the ultimate journeyman, the ultimate jobber, the ultimate B-side. You know, he's been the B-side over and over and over again. And he always puts up a good fight. He always gives a good show. Every once in a while, he sneaks one out. And that was clearly the narrative. In a way, this was a stay busy fight for Jacobs. You know, that, and I think I kind of viewed it that way too, in a lot of ways, and I like Rosado. But I think the narrative going into the fight was that this was a stay busy fight for Jacobs. You know, it wasn't really that much of a threat, and if Jacobs was Jacobs, that this was going to be kind of easy. And that's not what happened at all. What happened was Jacobs spent 12 rounds being very, very passive. Not initiating, not really engaging when Rosado got near him, not really engaging when Rosado hit him. And Rosado was not overly aggressive himself, but his jab was really busy. You know, on the occasion that Daniel would try to throw something serious, there was always an answer. And for the most part, for 12 rounds, I think Rosado just kind of stuck to the boxing basics and gave Jacobs kind of a boxing lesson. You know, I think anywhere from 9-3 to 7-5 is appropriate for that fight, just because even when Jacobs would land, there was these long gaps of inactivity where he was just doing nothing. He was kind of just having a look. And I kept thinking, it was like, all right, you know, when he fought Canelo, he started out kind of slow. You know, he didn't get really going in that fight until the 7th or the 8th. I thought, you know, maybe that's just what he's doing again. And since it's not Canelo, it's going to work. And then the 7th goes by, the 8th goes by, the 9th goes by. If anything, Rosado's just getting better the back half of the fight. He's getting more confident. He's landing the right hand upstairs. The jab is landing pretty regularly. He's mixing up where he's putting it. And it's very rare that there's something coming back at him. So, you know, at the end of the fight, I felt pretty confident that Rosado was going to win. But I had this sinking feeling in my gut that wasn't going to happen, because that's always what fucking happens in boxing. And so they go to read the decision and they say it's a split decision. I'm like, of course, here we go. And they say the first one's for Rosado, second one for Jacobs. Then they read the third one, 115-113, for your winner by split decision from Philadelphia. And they say the from Philadelphia. If you're watching that fight, you know Jacobs is from Brooklyn and Rosado's from Philadelphia. So I started freaking the fuck out about, holy shit, there's some justice in boxing. This is fucking amazing. And I have like a minute where I'm celebrating, and I look back at the TV, and Jacobs is like very timidly holding his hand, or the ref's holding his fist up, and I'm like, wait, what the fuck just happened? And they're talking about how they announced the decision wrong, they announced the cities wrong, which made it double shitty. It made it double fucking shitty, man, because you not only just straight up got the decision wrong, you gave that guy that moment of feeling like he had that glory. That's like 15, 20 years of hard work, you know, accumulating into the potentially the biggest win of your career. And they didn't just take it from him. They gave him 3-4 seconds to let him feel like he had it, and to let us feel like he had it, you know. And it's unfortunate that this sport shoots itself in the foot so often, and I'm going to keep talking about it until it's not a problem anymore. But time after time, there seems to be too many interests, too many people with their hands in the pot that dictate and add the narratives on these fights. And so it's almost like it doesn't matter what we see with our own eyes. It doesn't matter the fucking fight we watch. If there's money in one fighter, the whole sport, the whole system is going to go out of its way to make sure that that money train keeps on going. Because there's a lot of people that know, and it doesn't necessarily work like this, right? Like if they gave the decision to Rosado, he doesn't instantly become as marketable as Danny Jacobs. It doesn't work like that. If Danny Jacobs gets an iffy decision, you know, they have no problem throwing him in with one of the top guys now. He'll get that big fight. And it's the system of boxing that has pushed him through. Be it the promoters, the athletic commissions, the judges, the belt organizations, the networks. There's 10 different things working, in this case, in Danny Jacobs' favor. The whole narrative of the fight is built around him and what's next for him. And Rosado's just a piece in that narrative. He's just a piece in that story. That was the Danny Jacobs show. And it was going to be the Danny Jacobs show regardless of what happened in the fucking ring. And that's the shit that has to stop. And there has to come a certain time where, as fans, we have to be educated enough about what's going on and why it's happening to know when to turn the TV off, or to know when it's time to stop participating at a certain point. You know, if a fight's taking place in a certain state, or you know a certain judge is judging the fight, don't watch that shit, man. Don't watch it. It's the only way we as fans have any power in it. Look at these bad decisions. Look who's judging them. You see the judges judging these fights, turn the TV off. I know it sucks. We all want to see the fight. But if we want to stop seeing ripoffs, we have to let them know, hey, these individuals, the Julie Lettermans, the Adelaide Birds, the Gail Van Hoys, if you put them on, we turn the fucking TV off. Because there is no central authority in boxing. There's state entities, you know, the state athletic commissions in America. There's certain smaller countries that have their own athletic commissions. There's the belts. There's the promoters. There's the networks. There's no one central body that can hold anybody accountable. So we have to be the accountability. We have to turn the fucking TV off if they say Adelaide Bird is judging. We have to. That's a bad example because she didn't judge this fight. But there are judges who are consistently doing wrong by the sport that keep getting work. And part of the why they keep getting work is because we stay no matter what. You know, they know what kind of fans we are. They know that I've been coming back, and I'm not an old dude. I've been coming back for fucking 17 years for this shit. And they do it over and over and over again. And I keep coming back. And they know it. They know we come back. They know we want to see good fights. They know we want to see good fights regardless of how fucked up and corrupt the sport is. So, just remember that. They'll keep feeding you bullshit if they know you'll eat it. That's all I'm going to say. On Saturday, let me get some water. On Saturday, we had the first fight. It was in the afternoon. It was in England, Queensberry Promotions. It was Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce getting the 10th round knockout over the young man. and ultimately putting himself in pretty good position, I would say. Going into this fight, I really thought Dubois had the edge, and part of that was he's been, at least in the fights I've seen, he looks like a huge puncher. He's built very stocky, but he's very athletic and fast. I think his technique is a little more textbook than Joyce's. So there was, he's 12 years younger. There's all of these things that I would have viewed being in his favor. And in the ring, I think they were in his favor. I think he was landing hard combinations. I think he was faster. I think a lot of times he was able to get off first with his combinations. But then there's the little things. There's the little intangibles. Like Joyce's jab. Joyce's jab was fucking relentless. I mean, every chance he had, pop, pop, pop. And you could see third, fourth round, Dubois, I believe it was his left eye was starting to get really puffy. And you could see that, all right, Dubois is landing on Joyce, but Joyce is rolling the punches. Joyce is taking him clean, and he's not really affected by it. It's not affecting him the same way as maybe it would have affected Dubois' other opponents. He's more durable. He has more experience. He's been hit, against guys like Stavern and Brian Jennings and other guys that have that experience. So he's had the experience of getting hit. And Dubois hitting him, and it's not affecting him in the same way. And you could see that what it was taking for Dubois to do what he was doing was taking much more energy for Dubois to keep doing what he was doing than for Joyce to do what he was doing. Because frankly, Joyce wasn't throwing any power punches. It was all jabs for the most part, for that 10 rounds. It was all jabs. But he was pounding him with it, and he wasn't using a lot of energy doing it. I kept thinking he's going to need to open up at some point, but it was like by the 8th, you could see Dubois' eye was basically closed. His eye was very fucked up. And when he went down in the 10th, you could see the jab landed so cleanly right on the button, and you could see he grabbed it, and he winced a little, and he went down, and I was like, that's it. That's the one. That's the one. He was like, I can't take anymore. And, I saw some mixed reaction from different fighters about him quitting. It's a tough sell for me to say that he quit, because if you're looking at his eye, I think it's very possible that he has a broken orbital bone, which is a bone in your eye socket. You think about Kell Brooks suffering that injury twice against Golovkin and Spence. There's a lot of instances of that injury happening and fighters needing to stop. A good example of someone having that injury and not stopping is Pacquiao and Margarito. Margarito had a broken orbital bone, I think, for a good portion of the fight, and fought through it like a warrior. But if you've looked at Antonio Margarito's face in the last decade, it looks like one of his eyeballs is from somebody else's face. Like, he's never going to look right again. He's got one eye that looks like it's from somebody else's fucking face. And that's because he wanted to be a warrior, and he wanted to fight through that pain. Now, you can have appreciation for that and think, wow, like he really wanted it. He wanted it. He really fucking wanted it. But I don't think that detracts from a fighter who's 23 years old, who's in excruciating pain, who's maybe experiencing something they've never experienced before, that takes a knee and says, I can't continue, I'm injured. I think somebody pushing through that injury and suffering with it for the rest of their life, that one person will make that choice. You can't you can't discredit another fighter because they're not willing to make that choice. I don't think. And maybe that's because I'm not a fighter. I'm just like a gym rat and a trainer. But if I'm in Dubois' corner, it's hard for me to look at him and be like, yo, bro, you quit. Like, I don't think he quit. That eye looks pretty bad. That eye looks really bad. And if he's got a broken bone in there, when he's getting hit on there, there's nerve pain shooting through his whole face and his whole head. You're not in his body. If you're looking at that man saying he quit, you're not in his body. You're just not. He's too young to empty the tank on this fight. I know it's a big fight, but there's no way this kid doesn't have other big fights in his future. And we all know it. We all know he's very talented. We all know Joyce is 35. He's got more experience, fought better guys. You know, Joyce, in a lot of ways, is in his prime, and Dubois is not yet in his prime. So I think you got to ease up on the kid and just give Joyce the credit for having a good game plan, being smart, sticking with the jab, not trying to get too fancy, not trying to be something he's not. And, by the way, being much better defensively than I've ever seen him in a fight. He was way better. So I think Joyce is headed for something big. I think he deserves it. I think this kid he fought was fucking dangerous and athletic, and he handled it. So depending on what happens with Usyk and his mandatory against Joshua and whatever, maybe we get to see Usyk and Joyce next. Who knows? So after all of that, we had the big night. The big Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. fight. And I will tell you, I was not going to buy this shit. I was not going to buy it. On Saturday, the way I was feeling about it a little bit was like I have to have my voice heard with my dollar or lack of dollar. Like I can't contribute to this. But the longer in the day it went on, it started getting to the point where it was just like I don't really know how I'm gonna miss this. I don't really know how I can justify not watching this at all. So I bought it. And I bought it with the expectation that I was going to spend the whole time feeling kind of cringy and uncomfortable. Because as a purist, it's like, I don't want to see these two guys embarrass themselves. I want to see them come in shape, hopefully, and put on a good showing of themselves. But I don't want to watch two guys, you know, who helped me develop my passion for the sport embarrass themselves. I'm just not interested. I'm not interested in the YouTube boxing shit. I'm not interested in celebrity boxing. As a fan, as a purist, and I'm sure a lot of you feel this way. It's like I'm in it for the sport, and that's it. The entertainment part, the show part, that's all secondary for me. But I'm not the only person watching boxing, and so if you're gonna do a card like this, the best thing you can do is treat it like what it is. It's entertainment. It's entertainment. This was not necessarily an athletic event. This was an entertainment event with athletics. And I say that because the first three fights on the card were fucking tremendous, man. This first fight with Edward Vasquez and Irvin Gonzalez, Vasquez winning a split decision. If that fight's not 8 rounds and buried at the very beginning of this undercard, it's maybe fight of the year. I mean, Vasquez was fucking relentless. Gonzalez kept trying to make it a boxing match, and they would clash all the time throughout the rounds. And, you know, you couldn't have kicked it off a better way. Like two hungry young guys that clearly have a future going at it, putting their heart on the line and putting on a great fucking show, you know. So that fight was tremendous. Then the second fight, you had Jermaine Ortiz beating Suleiman, I believe his name is Suleiman Sagawa. Hope I didn't get that wrong. But stopping him in the 7th round of another fight that was a complete banger. These guys were fucking swinging on each other. Very high skill level, but a very high pace, a lot of offense. And Ortiz ultimately just proven to be a little too much, a little too big, too many things in his bag to go to. And then the third fight was Badu Jack winning a unanimous decision against Blake McKiernan. You know, this was not a competitive fight, but it was a good chance to see Badu. We haven't seen Badu in about a year. You know, this was the perfect opponent for him to showcase his skills a little bit and be the star of the show as far as like, you know, this is how you do it. This is how it's done. You know, being 37, you know, he is a little bit older, but he's still very much has it. He's still fresh. He's still got it. I think he's still got some years in the tank. And following that fight, we had the fucking spectacle of Jake Paul and Nate Robinson, with Paul knocking Nate Robinson out in the 2nd round. I don't like this shit. I don't like this YouTube shit, man. I don't like that. I don't like how these guys get to cut the line just because if you're Nate, you're a professional basketball player. If you're Jake Paul, it's because you have millions of views on the internet, vlogging your life and doing prank videos and whatever. I got no problem with any of it. I love basketball. Don't have a problem with how Jake Paul spends his time and his money. But I don't necessarily like that it's on these cards. And I don't like now that somebody like Jake Paul, who's a professional fighter, can get away with fighting people that aren't professional fighters. The more experience he gets, the more dangerous that is. So the more the commissions just sort of allow him to pick who he wants to fight just for the spectacle of it, like let's see this YouTube kid knock out famous people. At a certain point, he's going to have to fight quality professional boxers, or he's not going to be able to fight. That's my opinion. I think at a certain point, he'll get denied. If he has 2-3 more of these where he's fighting people that have never boxed in their life, and he's on his 4th, 5th, 6th fight, he's going to have a hard time getting a license unless he fights somebody that has some professional experience. And if you're Nate, it's like, and I know everyone is saying this right now, but you don't play boxing. It's a whole different thing. It doesn't matter if you're a professional athlete. It really doesn't in boxing. I've been in gyms before where I've looked at a guy spar and I've watched him, and I've been impressed with what he does. And wow, he's got great speed. He moves real good. Da 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 da. And then you get in the ring and you spar with them, and it's like, I think I can handle this. They fall for your feint, or, you can get your jab to land how you want it to, or your timing. They don't really they can't get your timing. And then there's times where you're in the gym and you see a guy spar and you're like, I don't get it. Whether be it that they have a hard time with somebody you sparred with, or they don't physically look impressive or imposing. I've sparred with like 40-year-old hairy guys where you just don't necessarily, it doesn't look like much when you're outside of the ring, and then you get in the ring with them, and there's like a weird timing, or there's an expertise in what they're doing that's something you didn't necessarily expect. It's like, wow, every time I throw my fucking jab, I'm paying for it. Or, this guy's punches are so slow, but they keep hitting me, and normally I'd be able to get out whatever. But it's like you don't really know what you're looking at until you're in there with it. And that's kind of maybe what Nate discovered. It's like, okay, just because you can hit the bag and look pretty on hitting the bag, and you think that this kid's not athletic, he's not coordinated, that's not how it works, man. You could take all that fucking basketball experience and shove it up your ass. And anybody that's like LeBron James would knock out a fighter. It's like, you don't know what you're saying, man. I guarantee you put LeBron James in with Anthony Joshua, he's not going to last. There's no way. It's a different fucking sport. So I hope there's a humbleness that comes with these celebrity fights, that they understand that they're not fighters. I think Jake Paul does understand to a certain extent that he's different. He's not calling out Canelo Alvarez. He's not calling out Golovkin or Usyk or somebody. He's not calling out real fighters. So he knows what he is. But at a certain point, it's like you fought enough where you're a pro fighter now. And so there's consequences to being a pro fighter. You have to fight other pro fighters, and you might lose. You might get embarrassed. You might get fucking hit. We've yet to see this kid get hit, really. But, and then there was the main event, Mike and Roy, and I thought having Snoop on the commentary being silly and not treating it like, oh my God, this is the matchup of the century, and treating it like it's 2001 or 98 or whatever. I thought that was good. I felt like it was addressed in an appropriate way. I thought Mike was in great shape and looked way better than I thought he was gonna. He was much more athletic and coordinated. You could really hear the thud on his body shots. And the first 4 or 5 rounds, you could see Roy was kind of huffing and puffing a little bit, and I think it was more physical than he anticipated. I think Tyson hit harder than he anticipated, and those body shots did a number on him. And I think Mike was in better shape than Roy, frankly. But somewhere in the 5th, 6th round, like the car started for Roy, and he got, he did his Roy Jones thing with the fast, flashy combinations and the moving around and the dancing. So and then they wound up calling it a draw. So in my mind, it's like, is it a draw? I don't know. I wasn't fucking scoring it because it's not an important fight. But if you look at it, it's like the front half is Tyson, the back half is Roy. Okay, I can deal with that. And you could see afterwards, Mike had a good time, man. It was cool to see how excited he was about it, and how much he enjoyed himself and enjoyed the humanitarian part of it. Because you got to remember, that was the big thing for me. Like, all of the proceeds of this card went to giving PPE to first responders. So now the cause is bigger than everybody just getting rich tonight. That's where I was sold on it. And I was like, all right, this is bigger than the sport. And Mike's made it bigger than the sport because he's not making it about him. He's making it about the cause. And, you could see Roy was a little like, God damn, those fucking body shots are hard, man. And you could see he was like, there's a reason there's a bucket list item. Like, because there's nothing like this guy. And you could see, man, Mike is still a fucking brick. He's not fighting anybody serious. There's no way. But if he wants to keep fighting former champions for charity and putting YouTube stars on it, and then on top of that, putting young talent and putting genuine boxing talent on those undercards, maybe it's not all bad. Maybe it's not all bad. Maybe it's really like, if Jake Paul wants to play the clown, but what it does is it forces a whole different generation of people to sit down and watch 2 hours of real boxing beforehand and take that in and learn. Because there's people, their whole understanding of the sport right now is the Paul brothers and Ryan Garcia. And that's everything they know about boxing. Maybe if Jake Paul can continue respecting the sport and continue making that distinguishment, like, yo, I'm not crossing over into this real thing. I'm kind of doing my thing, but maybe I can put you on to something that I love. Because you could tell he really does love this shit. You could tell he really does love boxing. And maybe if he can be that guy to be like, look, I'm coming at it from a different angle, but show these guys some love. I respect that. I really do. I think he could use his platform to expand the sport in a meaningful way. And so can Mike. These guys really gave guys like Edward Vasquez and Irvin Gonzalez and Jermaine Ortiz the opportunity to shine on a different kind of platform. There's a weird kind of like reverse like capitalism thing where it's like, how is it that the spectacle fights are the main events? But hopefully it's not always like that. Hopefully there comes a time where the public has an appreciation and a hunger for the sport in its finest quality, that fights like this will be the appetizer. And what they really want to see is the real thing. But either way, I think it is a good thing that these guys get this platform. And I've always been against this YouTube boxing shit, but it's really, it depends on its role. If its role is to enable younger people, like people, I'm 27, people even younger than me, to discover the sport and not be a competitor to the sport. Like, you're either into Jake Paul versus Nate Robinson or you're into Danny Garcia and Errol Spence. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think they can mix together and one can help the other. And hopefully Jake Paul loves the sport enough to continue doing that in his platform. And also, it didn't hurt that there was music stars, Snoop Dogg, Wiz Khalifa, YG. There were some cool performances. I think that night treating boxing like entertainment and not treating every fight card the same is important. Give prestige where it's due, and provide entertainment when that's what you're providing. You know what I'm saying? Last thing I want to talk about is we got next weekend the big fight between Errol Spence and Danny Garcia, which I think is a very intriguing matchup. I think it would always have been intriguing, but I think it's even more intriguing now because Spence hasn't fought since the Porter fight and recovering from the car accident. There's questions that have to be answered. about him, his mental state, his physical state, like where's his body at, because getting in shape and then being in a fight are two different things. And then on top of that, he has to answer these questions against this guy who can really fucking crack, who has really good speed, is a really good counterpuncher, maybe a great counterpuncher, and has been more active, not just how often he's fighting, like in his fights, his punch output, I feel like, is up from what it normally would be. So I think Spence is coming in against a very motivated, hungry, and improving Danny Garcia, who's, I think, hitting his prime right now. And I just don't know if you want to be fighting this guy having to answer these questions. Because this is not Sean Porter either, where when Danny comes in, there's a lot of head movement. There's a lot of feinting. There's a lot of more subtle things. Sometimes what there's not a lot of is there's not a lot of punching. And that's maybe where Errol can be a problem for him. But Danny's much more measured coming in than Sean Porter. So he's not just gonna take the punishment that Porter's taking on the way in. It's gonna be smaller bursts, smaller moments. Unless Danny's really like, yo, I'm gonna sit in the pocket, I'm gonna be active, I'm gonna trade with this guy. I feel like if he wants to do that and he can do that, he has a very good chance of winning. I think if Errol is the Errol that he was against Porter and against Kell Brook, I think it's still a difficult fight, but I think he wins. I think Errol would beat Danny even on Danny's best day. But that's only if Errol's at his best. And that's the big if. And that's why I'm not going to make an official prediction on this fight. Because I'm not going to pretend to be the oracle. I don't know where Spence is at. But what I do know is when he's at his very best, he's arguably the best welterweight in the world. And we have yet to have any reason to doubt that anybody other than Terrence Crawford could beat him. So I just don't know. If he's not the fighter he was a year and change ago, it's going to be very difficult against this guy to answer all those questions. I'm looking forward to that fight. I'm probably going to buy that fight as well. And we'll see, man. It's another case of the best fighting the best. It's like the complete opposite of Mike and Roy. The fight genuinely deserves the prestige because it's two of the top 4 or 5 welterweights in the world fighting each other. And hopefully Terrence Crawford can fight the winner of this fight. That's all I'm going to say. And at that, I'm going to leave it at that. That's episode 27 of the Slip and Weed podcast. Thanks for tuning in again, you guys. And I'll catch you next week. Peace.